listening to a Better Mousetrap podcast, a joint production with Far From TV. Before we dive into today's episode, we are proud and grateful to present this week's sponsor. Does your business need to reach a significant number of New York City's founders and leaders in the startup community? Then you should be seen and heard on a Better Mousetrap newsletter and podcast. We have the eyes and ears of founders, leaders of accelerators, incubators, and co-working spaces. We highlight what's important to them, which means it's important to you. Email me, marcos@bettermousetrap.nyc. That's marcos@bettermousetrap.nyc. Learn how you can get the attention of the doers in New York City's startup scene. This is Marcos Dinnerstein of a Better Mousetrap podcast, coming to you, as I have in the past, from the Signature Theater lobby. A great place to hang out, get some work done. And with me today is Lowell Kaufman, co-founder of The Well-Informed Pet. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
And thanks for having me, Marcos.
So, first off, we'll start in chronological order, and I'll ask you about your background. What's your backstory here?
So my backstory before I started this pet thing, basically, I have a computer science background, did some computer science jobs and consulting company, but in the 90s, I was part of that first wave of internet startups, which ages me a little bit, I think. But I was employee number one CTO of a company that was one of the first webmail products. It was called Mighty Mail. It was meant to do direct marketing within the email. So our first clients were people like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, where you basically, let's say I'm a Britney fan, and I am because this was a successful exit. I have Britney Mail. So I have this email that's kind of branded with all this Britney stuff, and I send it to you. You may not be a Britney fan, but you'll still get all my Britney decorated email and Britney songs that may be unreleased. So the idea was this kind of branded web marketing, and the only webmail products around at the time were Hotmail and AOL and things like that. So we built this. We got bought out by one company called Zoom, which merged with a company called Snap the same week we were acquired, and that became NBCI, NBC's internet property. So it was a very successful exit, and I thought I made some internet money, and I moved to Joshua Tree in California, opened a cafe, and did some stuff there. That we had the fastest internet connection in the area, and we're an internet hub back then as well in the middle of nowhere. So I ran a coffee house until I realized I needed to make money again because it was fake money. Ended up working a little bit more corporate. I worked at Goldman Sachs for 10 years, but I had the itch. I've always had the itch to go back and do a startup, which I was exploring in my last year at Goldman, and then it led to what became Well-Informed Pet. So, I've been doing a lot of different things which led to doing this startup, but I'm glad I'm doing the startup thing again.
I see. So you have that entrepreneurial itch.
Yeah. I do well in the enterprise setting, and I think that helps. Actually, I've told people who are starting out, I think it's good to get some corporate experience in your belt, because those will end up being your customers most likely. So it's good to understand that world when you're doing something entrepreneurial. So I found working both sides of the fence has helped. Even with Goldman, I was really their skunk work in residence. So I did a number of little startup-y kind of endeavors within the company that led to some success. I think I think it helped Goldman realize that doing things in that way can actually lead to some benefits, even in a corporate culture like that.
Makes sense. And as well, it gives you operational experience that people who just go directly into startups probably don't have, and a lot of reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it works both ways. It's the startup entrepreneurial thing helps if you're in a corporate gig, and but understanding the process and how the gears work, and and that it just helps you understand what's going on in order to be able to even sell, and it makes you think about the process more even as a startup. So taking some of the processes around software development that you go through, the rigor that you have to go through at a bigger enterprise, reflects and can help when you're trying to scale up your startup.
Okay, you mentioned before we started recording that you'd worked on other startups as well. What were the other startups that you worked on?
So I mentioned the successful one with Mighty Mail. I worked on a couple of others. One was kind of like a second generation of Mighty Mail, which was meant to be more of a business version of that branded email. So the idea was your email is your desktop, is really, it like replaces your desktop was the concept. And this was probably around 99, 2000 is when that was going on. I worked on a CRM tool for a couple of years. This was around after I was doing the cafe, or while I was like deciding whether I'll continue with the cafe. I commuted between Joshua Tree and San Francisco, and the tool was basically an analytics tool. It would analyze the language that comes from a sales call and look at the patterns of the most common language that was found, and from there be able to basically draw some conclusions. I think it was very early for that kind of advanced technology to really understand the patterns of speech and the patterns of common usage of a sales call and leveraging that to tie into the rest of your CRM system. The idea there was we'd integrate with the Salesforce with more valuable business insights that you were tracking. Like a lot of startups around, frankly, when 9/11 happened, it was really hard to continue getting funding for a little while at that time. And so I think that was the main struggle for that particular one. And I won't go into it because it's way too long a story, but there was another startup which made me move back to New York, which was basically the idea was a holding company of 4 or 5 different startups to form a more powerful offering. And I was brought in as like the technical program manager with the CEO who we got one paycheck, and he wasn't honest about the funding situation. He was deceitful, and sure, that happens a lot to people. I mean, there's not an uncommon story. What the uncommon story was, he was also apparently involved before he started this company in working with a Saudi Arabian kind of behind-the-scenes leader involved in the Nicaragua gun Iran Contra thing. And so I don't know exactly. I know that he was, the government was going after him. I didn't know that while I was there.
So did you get to meet with Oliver North?
I did not get to meet with Oliver North or the Saudi Arabian. I think they were trying to pressure him into putting the screws on that Saudi Arabian guy, just like you see going on in our current environment with certain situations, and it didn't happen. I know he was found innocent of what he was charged for, which is basically he was charged with promoting a different company's stock that really wasn't existing as a real thing, and he appeared on shows on CNN and shows like that to promote. So that was another startup experience I wasn't expecting to go into.
That's quite fun. Now we'll just clarify that he wasn't found innocent. He was found not guilty.
He was found not guilty. Yes, thank you. But it was bad because he wasn't being honest about the paycheck thing. But even worse for me was like, all right, I know the funding thing is difficult. I was being tactful with him, and again, this was before the whole the government thing was happening to him. But I just urged him, please, whatever you do, let me know if you're not going to pay the healthcare bills, because healthcare, I just got to pay my insurance bills. And of course, he didn't even do that. So I had a couple of weeks I was scrounging around for I got to get healthcare now, which I worked out.
That's good. Healthcare matters.
Yes, healthcare matters.
So that brings us, at least roughly, to the well-informed pet. Why pets?
Sure.
I mean, I know why not pet rocks, but why pets?
Pet rocks, yeah, that was a good thing. I wish I invented that one. So I was really exploring a number of different things in the healthcare space when I was thinking about doing a startup. And actually, my cousin, who's a doctor, had an idea which I was pursuing with him in the research mode about doing away with the concept of digital health records the way they are, and making it easier for you as the patient to be empowered with your health record information. It just led to the more research, and when I was talking with my other programmers and we were bouncing around ideas, I blurted out that it'd be so much easier to do for my dog, because you don't have as much regulatory stuff. You don't have where the data is owned by monolithic insurance and hospital companies and things like that. So it's maybe there's something there. Meanwhile, my wife and I were with our dog Kona, who has some health issues. We were upstate in the Catskills, and she needed to see a vet, and I didn't have her health history. And here I am thinking about the people side. I didn't have her health history handy. It's what the heck? I'm a software engineer. Why isn't this stuff in the cloud? So between those two things, it led to, there's some idea here. I didn't know anything about the pet space. I know a lot about the pet space now. I mean, it's a $70 billion industry. It's going to be $100 billion just within like 5 years. It's one of these like recession-free markets. It's an unusual market in that in the technology sector, it's just in its infancy. It reminds me of my early internet days in that there's so many different paths. And you may remember in the early internet days, pets.com, which didn't do well. Chewy did pretty well in where they're at. So you know the timing is much better now than it was then for something. But it's really, because it's such a scattered industry, there's not a lot of tech stuff happening that's innovative until more recently, and now it really is a growing thing. So between all those things, I mean, I remember the first time when I was still in research mode, I was taking a vacation and I was in Orlando at the Global Pet Expo, which is one of the 2 or 3 biggest pet conferences in the country. And I was just doing research. I just had an inkling of the idea of centralizing health information, which is essentially what we're talking about here. And now it's really about empowering trust between pet parents and caretakers, because there's so many caretakers of pets. So I was at Global Pet Expo. It's like 3,000 vendors, 6 miles of booths, and I'm looking at this like, my God, this is just humongous. I was excited by it, which kind of let me, my inner gut saying, this is cool, compared to like the corporate Goldman days and whatever. This is a big thing. But there was very little tech at this conference, and so that even more reinforced this is going to happen. And certainly as I talked to different people there, I learned a lot about it. It led me towards thinking about the horse market first, actually, because the horse businesses there said the idea of centralizing health information for a horse where the horse owner is not around their horse very much is a better thing, and it's a richer industry, and they're right about all that. But and we built a version of this for horses, of which the main feedback we got from the horse owners, good idea, but talk to our stable owners and our trainers, and they looked at it and said, this is Carfax for horses. We don't want to tell anybody about information, even the owners, about the health information of a horse. So my feedback from that was, all right, the education of this is going to take a while. I'd research what happened with Carfax to make people more attuned and agreeable to that. Or I can go back to the ridiculously large segment of the pet world. It's just a skin as far as I'm concerned on the tech side. So that's what we did. I always knew in the back of my mind that it wasn't going to be a big loss if the horse thing wasn't going to be moving forward as much as it did. It's still there and it's still available and it still has possibilities, but my focus as still a baby startup is back into the pet space.
So where is the well-informed pet right now? What stage of your development do you have? Customers, or what kind of traction do you get?
Yeah, sure. So, since we pivoted to the pet space, we have about 200 early adopters who've given us feedback. We're monetizing more as a B2B business, and we really just decided to pivot on that recently. So that's one of the things that we're up to. So we have a product. We have, a small but okay audience out there. We also I have built up a good network of pet partners, which is why I'm pivoting to the B2B maybe sooner than I had planned. Where we're white labeling this for different purposes, and we get business intelligence as we build up the product, and that becomes a commodity as well. So the partnerships I've built up is mainly through my network of events. I run a New York City Pet Tech Meetup. We have about 950 members in New York, and I'd say there are 20 to 30 startups, and we have an event I'll mention that's coming up on August 1st that's sponsored with Purina, where it's going to have a number of investor angels on a panel, Purina, and it's going to be talking about the pain points for startups. So I think it's a good event, not just for the pet business, but for people in general who are interested in entrepreneurial types who want to learn more about this. I think it's going to have a broad variety of panels. So anyway, I've built up this network. And so as I mature the product and I'm building up these business relationships, I want to link together my reach. I have a reach of like 2 million pet parents, but I know if I spend money on reaching to that audience that I have access to now, it's a little too early while we need to do something with the product. So I'm at that crux of that difficult transition of I'll either pivot and I'll make it and it'll be great, because I think once I get over that one hurdle, then I think everything else will basically fits and moves forward, and that's the challenge I'm at right now. But that's it's the startup process. It's where you're at. So that's where I'm at.
And are you raising funds now to extend that runway?
Yeah, I've basically raised friends and family money, and I'm at that juncture where I'm trying to sell that I have promise. So I'm looking at, kind of basically still seed level, seed to it's not even pre-seed. I'd say it would be seed money level, and looking at angel investment basically, and making the rounds, doing the pitches, and things like that. I'm talking to some nonprofits because I have a lot of benefit in building for nonprofits, so they actually may be able to help some development going on. That may be a quick way to do some quick wins while I do more, more formal fundraising as well.
Cool. So now let's get into details about the event.
Sure. Yeah. So as I said, the event is August 1st. It's at WeWork Labs in Soho. I think it's 154 grand. If you go to Meetup and search on NYC Pet Tech in Meetup, you'll find it for August 1st. We're going to showcase 7 to 8 startups, including mine, that are all partaking in Purina's Innovation Prize. Purina runs an Innovation Prize program every year, and so they're in New York, and these are 7 or 8 highlighted startups that may become part of the Innovation Prize. So we'll have some talk about the Innovation Prize, some talk about the pet startup world, some talk from angels that'll be more generic startup help and startup information. The panel, the showcase startups are going to, they're going to have tables, and they're going to each not pitch, but more introduce themselves as 1 minute each before the panelists, with the ask of a key question of what is your startup pain you're experiencing now. So that could be a preamble for the panelists to discuss some of the issues that are really matter to startups. So in my case, it's that pivot from B2C to B2B that I've done very recently, and trying to get more insight on how to commoditize and provide some sort of business model that makes sense for a white label or B2B, and how do you transition that when you've not focused on that yet as a startup, and the best way to use resources for that. That would be my ask from the panel at this stage of the game. So that's it. It's August 1st. WeWork Labs, 154 grand in Soho, and it's like $5 to get in, but the money's going to go to charity, to a rescue organization.
Terrific. And if investors or other pet-related startups want to get a hold of you, how do they reach you?
Best way is through my email, which is lowell@wellinformedpet.com. I think that's, you can go to the website and the contact info is there, or sign up for the app and you'll get lots of email from me too.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Marcos Dinnerstein, host of A Better Mousetrap podcast, and thank you for listening.